Section 65.90, paren 4 of Wisconsin State Statutes as follows. Public hearing shall be held at the time and place stipulated at which time any resident or taxpayer of the governmental unit shall have an opportunity to be heard on the proposed budget. This time we'll have an overview from Superintendent Dr. Haynes.
All right, well, good evening, everyone. I'd just like to start off by sharing a few bullet points, and then I'll turn it over for a detail and a presentation by Keith. As many of you know, the last several years, Keith has been reporting and projecting a reduction in the state equalization aid. You'll see a description of that visually in a couple of minutes, but there's been a decrease. That's probably that's the biggest reduction that we have in influencing our bottom line of the state budget in terms of Ashwaubenon. That's a projection right now of about negative $850,000. So, but even with that decline, our district levy, it's still projected to be a little bit less than last year. Now that's a projection, so that will be a little bit less. So our bottom line tonight, we're going to propose a budget levy of $19,085,522, or which is just it's almost a flat projection. It's a minus 0.29% change, so a little less than last year, but pretty flat. And we say this every year, but just to remind the public, what we're going to talk about tonight is just basically, it's an estimate. It's based on our best estimate and projections, and that has to do with things are obviously subject to change in October when we know more information from the state. So something that's a little unique this year in the budget. It's unique this year in that we projected to cover the inclusion of costs for required PCB contamination work. That's the soil contamination work that will be done between Parkview and the high school, that property. Keith's going to provide a financial plan on how we basically project to pay for that cost. But, bless you.
Thank you.
A big part of that, we owe a thanks. We will be securing a state trust fund loan that will be on an agenda for action tonight. And we want to thank our representative, Stefan and Senator Coles, both of them, for supporting a recent bill at the state level. And what that means to Ashwaubenon and any other school district like Ashwaubenon that would be in this situation, it allows us to pay for that cost, but outside of the school revenue limit. So, for example, we'll be considering a $1 million trust fund loan, and the district will pay annually, roughly $100,000 annually towards that loan. There's a big difference between that, and then obviously if we would have to take $1 million out of our budget, and then we'd also get hit that next year as a result of that. That was still within the regular school budget. And then I guess my last point, I just want to say a lot of thank yous. I thank Keith. I thank his entire department. I thank our administrative team and board. I'm just reflecting over the last 4 years. The budget in Ashwaubenon, it has not been an easy task for us, and a lot of people are very creative in trying to find ways to shift money, to reduce in areas that would have the least amount of impact that directly impacts kids and learning. So a huge thanks to everybody for doing that. And then in a bigger scale, our mission is to prepare our kids, obviously, to transition into the future. We have a lot of people in this village that continue to pull on that same rope, to either donate time and talent through service clubs, through gifts, and just in general, just the support that we have. I just heard Jay talk about this past weekend, the $11,000 or whatever that was raised, and many hours of volunteer work just at a softball tournament this last weekend, and that's just typical of Ashwaubenon. Mr. Williams volunteering his parking lot a couple weeks ago to the Optimist Club so that we could raise money, and it comes right back to kids in the district. We've had a lot of examples of that. So thank you to the community and to the many, many people that support our budget to help us move forward. So I'll entertain any questions the board would have. Otherwise, I know Keith will provide a in-depth, detailed report coming up on the corner here. Any questions?
Okay, first I want to welcome the crowd to the budget hearing. It's good to see some residents out. Love to see more. Offer to anybody out there who's watching on tape to call me if you have questions, you see anything in the budget that you want to know more about. We definitely want to engage the public as much as we can. Would love to see more people in attendance at our annual meeting and participating in this process. Budget book will be available online along with the presentation we're going to go through. So if you have interest and you want to review something, you can pull it up online and then call me with your questions. As Dr. Haynes mentioned, we are seeing a decline in equalization aid, or have seen a significant decline in equalization aid. And up until this year, that decline was directly related to the closure of the TIF and the significant increase in property values that resulted from a successful TIF. And I've said this in the past, I'll say it again. Don't blame the TIF for the decline in aid. The TIF really kept our aid higher than it would have been had the TIF not existed and we had that growth. So the TIF didn't cause the decline in aid. The TIF actually kept our aid higher than it would have been. But as I mentioned, that was the cause for recent years of aid reductions. This year, our aid is down based on membership, and that's the key factor. For this current school year that just ended, we were down over 100 students, resident students, over what we were projecting and what we had the previous year. So that reduction, as you see in the graph here, we've had a downward trend, and several times I've said to the board at our planning meetings that I think we're finally at the bottom of where that trend is. But looking at this last year, it looks like we're still on a slight downward trend. I'm hoping that we can flatten out or see resident increases. That really would be the best thing for our budget if we had more resident students. We have used open enrollment to fill the open seats and to help balance our budget, but we would very much prefer having resident students in those seats and being able to limit open enrollment. So the resident enrollment, that membership, which is the number of resident students, is the key factor driving our aid down. So when we compare, the way aid is distributed, it's based on property value per student or per member. So when we compare ourselves, we are the blue line on this graph. The state average is the red line. You see that the 1 year where the significant increase, that's the year when the TIF closed. But now if you look at the lines going forward, you're seeing that gap widen. So the gap can widen for two reasons: if we had significant property value growth or if we have reduction in students. So in our case, we have our property values may be outpacing the state a little bit on growth, but really it's reduction in students that's widening that gap, which is in turn reducing our aid. So then if we look at our aid, and this is the graph to me that's most telling, if you go back to 2006-07, we were at about $14 million in equalization aid from the state. For this coming year, we're going to be at about $4.7 million. That's a significant reduction. So some of that comes from the property value increases, but this last year of reduction is coming strictly from the loss in students and resident students. So that trend, I'm hoping we're getting near the bottom of that, but once again, it's going to tie to what happens with resident students. If we can level out on our resident student counts from year to year, we'll see that graph flatten out and stay about this level. So if we look at tax rates, it's hard to imagine that we'd have that significant a reduction in aid and still be able to have our mill rate on an equalized basis mirror what's happening at the state. And as you can see, we are the blue line and the state is the red line. We are still in tune with the state average, and we're mirroring it. So when there are aid cuts at the state level, you'll see mill rates tick up a little bit. When there's extra money put into the state school aid formula, you see tax rates go down. Or when the governor freezes the revenue limit, you won't see the mill rate go up significantly, as we've seen in the last couple of years. Between freezing or small increments in the revenue limit, the mill rates are very stable. If you look back going historically and you go back to where revenue limits were put in place in the early 90s, you can see we had mill rates up above $18 and we're right at about $10 now. So taxes are significantly less per $1,000 of equalized value now than they were just 20 years ago in that range. So I think schools and the limits put on at the state have helped maintain these mill rates and keep property taxes at a more stable level. And also, if anybody has questions as I go on, please speak up while it's fresh in your mind so we can answer them. So now if we go to our aid, how do we calculate our aid? And this method, the simplified percentage method, I think shows the best explanation to somebody how our aid works. basically the primary level, the first $1,000 we spend on a student, the state pays 57% and the district pays 43%. And that's because we have 57% of the amount of property value per student that the state is guaranteeing at that level. So because we're below that, we get that primary aid. Secondary level is the next $8,534 spent per student, and we get about 23.5% of those costs covered by the state. And where the problem comes in, that tertiary level, which for us is a little over $1,000 per student, where we are negatively aided, and it's up this year to negative 51.5%. So that means every incremental dollar we spend, we lose 51, almost 52 cents on every dollar we spend. And that's the big reason why we worked with the village on the recent referendum, because those incremental dollars on the referendum projects, we would have been aided at this percent. And this is up a little bit from last year because of the reductions that we saw in the student population, the resident students. So that number is a moving target a little bit depending on where we are property value per student. So it's looking a little worse than it did last year, and that was worse than the year before. We did bump up against the state has a hold harmless protection in the aid formula, where the most we can lose in any particular year of aid is 15% of what we had the previous year. So we have about $87,000 of hold harmless protection that we're getting. So if that wasn't there, we'd have $87,000 less aid. Not a significant number, but it tells us that if we see some changes, we're going to need to recover that. That $87,000 is going to come right off the top for next year, and we need to be prepared for that. Where our aid should be is a little less than where it is because of that hold harmless protection. And then at the bottom of the slide, the important number I look at is without the hold harmless, the total cost sharing of the state is paying under 19% of our costs for our students. So years ago, they used to talk about 2/3 funding of schools in the state. Because the state considers us property rich, we're getting less than 19% of our costs. And that's purely based on the factor of property value per student. So when you look at total aid, a school district like Ashwaubenon gets over 7 times the amount of aid we get, and they have just over twice as many students. It's because their property value per student is significantly lower, because they're seeing student growth and their property values aren't as high per student. So it's just something to keep in mind when you look at total aid received in the Green Bay area. We are the smallest aid receiving district. So if you saw the newspaper article that showed comparisons, we took a 15% cut, and we already were the lowest in aid. So graphically, when we look at this shows our aid over since 2004-05, and the red bars that you see in the middle there, that's the hold harmless protection that we had that is in place, that 15% loss per year protection. So you can see we should have been much lower in aid some of those years, and that protection helped us. But remember, the board will remember this, those years we spent extra money paying off some debt early as part of a plan, so that we were ready for this situation where we see a 15% aid cut and our long-term debt payments are down. So one of the questions that I would ask if I were sitting in your chairs or in the audience is, how can we have such a significant aid reduction and not see our total dollar levy going up? And that's because as a board, you've planned for this. You've looked at things on a 5-year horizon, and we've looked at how do we mitigate these aid losses that we saw coming. So it's important for people to realize that we may be losing significant aid dollars, but we're able to do it without a significant tax increase for our homeowners. So if we look at the budget for the coming year, we're looking at a budget of $31,149,000, and I want to emphasize to everybody who's watching, listening, or can hear me at all, this is an estimate. These numbers are going to change. This is early numbers, and the final numbers will be based on actual student counts in September and actual final aid numbers from the state. So the state aid is an estimate. I expect we're going to see a little more aid than what their July estimate is, but right now it's the best number we have. We're looking at the general fund levy, so this is just one of several funds that we levy into. The levy is up $250,000. Student fees, you'll see, are up $85,000. That's as a result of proposed adding a student material and textbook fee. Summer school fees are down $37,000. And we didn't really talk about that much at the board level, but that was based on something, we had a membership audit from the state, and DPI determined that the fees we were charging for summer school were not legal, that we couldn't charge those. So we ended up having to waive our fees for this past summer, and going forward, we're not able to charge an enrollment fee for summer school. Because we're getting membership for aid and revenue limit, we can't charge a basic enrollment fee. We can only charge fees for consumables. We have to show expenses that match up to the fees received. So some classes will have fees if they use materials in those classes, consume materials, but we can't just charge an overall fee. So that's $37,000 that we had to take out of our budget. Open enrollment revenue, once again, is up significantly. As I mentioned, that we've been filling our seats with open enrollment students. Right now, I'm projecting a $500,000 increase in open enrollment revenue. We had, we're counting on over 100 new students for the coming year that are open enrollment. So really, in the last year, we offset the losses in resident students with open enrollment students, and we've got significant numbers coming in, which is a good sign of our reputation in the area that parents want to come here. Equalization aid, you see, is down $850,000. That's that 15% reduction. We're down to 4.7, just under $4.8 million in equalization aid, where last year we were at 5.6
Can I
million.
just interject a
Sure.
comment there? Having to do with equalization aid, just something that we need to be mindful of, and a lot of us are reading about the expansion of the Packer Stadium, which is taking homes out of the district. And I know we aren't sure, and maybe they aren't sure at this point to what extent that's going to go deeper into Ashwaubenon, but just we need to be mindful and project as much as we are able to, given the information we have. If more homes are taken out of that area, to Keith's point earlier, one of the most significant areas that impacted our district budget is equalization. It's residential growth or pupil growth. So if there's a huge impact there, it will have a huge impact, obviously, on our budget. Whether that's now or in the next 5 to 7 years, we just need to be mindful of that.
And there are a couple other things happening with resident enrollment where the TIF districts are right now. We may be losing some students in some of the areas that are being redeveloped. So we just need to be ready, and that's why I'm a little less optimistic on when we're going to see our resident numbers stabilize.
Keith, do we have a number of students that are affected by the apartments that are being taken out at the end of this year?
I don't have an up-to-date number. I know we looked at it a couple of years ago, and it was, I believe, in the 40s. But I haven't looked at it.
Sound about right, Kurt?
And that was in that whole, the entire area. And I don't know that all of those apartments are affected in that William Charles Court area, but that was the number we had a couple of years ago. So bottom line, we're looking at our budget for this coming year is about $100,000 less than it was last year. And we're looking at a total student count, a head count, resident plus open enrollment, that's similar to last year. So that shows you the struggles that we have as there's some inflation going on in the economy and we've got other things going on. Our total budget is going down. So that's one of the reasons why we're making reductions. I should also point out there's adjustment aid in there. You'll see for $345,000. That is the per pupil aid that was added back into the budget that the governor had originally cut from the budget. So if that hadn't been added back in, we'd be $345,000 less. So now we go to expenditures, and I want to caution you, the middle column on this report are unaudited numbers, and I'll tell you right now, they're low, because when the auditors come in, there are some adjusting entries that we make at the end of the year, and in particular, health insurance is one of them where we have to accrue another month of health insurance, so that spreads equally between that whole column. So the total expenditures for 2014-15 show at about $29 million, almost $800,000. I expect that's going to be at least $1 million higher with the final audit entries that would come through. So it looks like our expenditures are up significantly over last year's unaudited results, but when we add in the adjusting entries, we're going to be, I believe, fairly level total cost-wise. In this is the state required format for approving expenditures, so it's broken down by curricular areas. So you've got your undifferentiated curriculum at the top and regular curriculum, which would be math, science, English, things like that, and then it breaks down into the different areas. We typically at the board level don't budget this way or show you the budget this way. Instead, we show you more by the manager of the budget, so the local control budgets are, you can tell, are the principal's responsibility. You can tell the business services budget separate from the human resources budget from the curriculum budget. So this is a different way this is the way the state requires us to post it and have it approved at the annual meeting. So then if we look at other funds, as I mentioned, our general fund is just one of many funds that we operate. So the first group of funds you see on this page are the special project funds. That's two main areas. It's the special education accounts, where our students with needs are accounted for and all our staff who are servicing them. And then there's donations fund. So we run some grants through that. We run everything that our booster clubs generate through that. So there's a lot of things in there. So you'll see that that number changes significantly as you go down there. And 2013-14, for example, you see it higher than it is for 14-15. The biggest reason is JAG Field Project was in there in 2013-14. So that was a significant cost. It was over $1 million that had to be accounted for in that fund. So that's why you see that that number will move around depending on what fundraising efforts or donations or things, even small local grants can be accounted for in there. The special ed portion of the fund in there has been pretty stable from year to year as far as total costs. We are seeing it's getting tight in there on the federal grant side, and there's always concerns what's going to happen when the federal budget gets an impasse. Are we going to see cuts in our federal grants? But it's been stable so far. Second group of funds you see are debt service fund. That is our debt related to referendums. So the number I like to talk about is the bottom number in that section, which is the indebtedness of the district at the end of the year. So as you can see, at the end of 13-14, we had $6.2 million, or just over that, in total outstanding debt. At the end of this past year, we have 5.2, just under $5.3 million in outstanding debt, and next year we'll be down to 4.3 million. So we're seeing that that's paying off quickly at this point, and we have about 5 years left on our debt from the referendums, and then all that debt will be paid off. So we'll see that going down. With that said, as Dr. Haynes mentioned earlier, we are looking at borrowing $1 million. That'll be on the regular board agenda later tonight for the contamination cleanup on the high school, middle school site, to help to cover those costs and spread that out over 10 years. So we will have some debt added in here, assuming that gets approved. All of these reports were prepared before the state budget was put in place, so I did not have that in. And I know Ginny left me a message today and asked about what happens with that, what does that free up? So in effect, that frees up about $100,000 in our operating budget, which is where I had budgeted the PCB cleanup debt service beforehand. But now with this addition in the state budget, we can pull that out of our revenue limit, out of our general fund. So we'll have $100,000 in less in expenditures than what I have factored into the budget as you saw it tonight, assuming you approve the financing that we have proposed for you later.
Are we still getting that grant then?
We do still have the grant, and we nothing has changed there. We are still pursuing legal action, and the advantage to the method that I'm proposing we fund that through a state trust fund loan is we can prepay on that loan. So if we would collect on something from a causer or even get donations from someone in the community to help cover the cost of the remediation, we can pay down on the debt and pay it off early if we would collect enough. But the grant definitely is factored in there. And I also want to remind you, there's two phases to that. We've got the area that's going to start within the next week, which is the field between the high school and Parkview, and going down towards where the shot put pit was by the track. That area is going to start within the next week or a little over a week. And then there's the area where the Ed Kirchmer Field is towards Clipstein Park, towards the community center. That's a second phase of the project where we own part of the land and the village owns part, so we'll talk about our options for sharing cost in that. So it's more than just the cost of that upper field that we're going to cover in this $1 million borrowing. Food service fund, you'll see the numbers going down, and the number I think you should look at there is the revenue. You see where we were 2 years ago at $1.4 million. This past year, $1,250,000 approximately in revenue, and next year I'm projecting $1,150,000. Why is that going down? It's simple. Federal regulations on our food, we're seeing participation go down noticeably. As we are allowed to serve less options, we're allowed to have less things like less salt and things like that. So the food is getting healthier, less kids are choosing to participate. And that's a choice we have to make, whether we participate in the free and reduced lunch program or not. If we participate in the free and reduced lunch program, we have to follow their nutritional guidelines. So we're constantly working, trying to make the food as attractive for the students and keep that participation up. And I think if you compare our trend to other districts in the state, we're doing much better than other districts are. Other districts are losing more participation as a percentage of their participation than we are. But it's a not a good trend. It's something, it's a concern that I have where we're going to be if this trend continues.
Where's, how much do we collect from free and reduced lunch?
How much do we collect total?
Yeah.
It is about 60% of this number is the federal reimbursement. So we realize the federal reimbursement, we collect money for free and reduced lunch. We also collect money for regular price lunch. It's a 15 cents a meal, something like that, that we get some federal subsidy on regular lunches as well. So it's not, so somebody whose children don't qualify for free and reduced lunch, we still get a subsidy per meal from the federal government for those students as well.
The other thing I'm looking at, Keith, is if we're having that significant of a decrease in everything, what if we didn't do that in the program, where would we be at? Or could we sustain?
Well, I think what you'd see is you'd be hurting those that need it the most, because all those free and reduced lunch students, and you see our percentage of students qualifying increasing from year to year, and when you look at our numbers, especially at the elementary grades and the primary grades of elementary, that percentage is getting very high, where we're getting close to 50% at Cormier and at Valley View School in those primary grades. So I think it goes against our mission. We're not helping these kids
I
prepare.
didn't say
if
get
we
rid
would.
of it. I didn't say
Right.
get rid of it. Fund it ourselves.
Fund it
instead.
ourselves, okay. It would be significant. We'd have to have significant meal price increases for all the families that are paying. And the other issue becomes determining who then is going to get a free or a reduced price meal. Right now, the federal government determines those limits. They set it, so we're out of that. We're not the bad guys if someone doesn't qualify, even though they feel they deserve. It's the federal guideline, so it creates another tension if we would eliminate it. But I think you'd see our meal prices would have to more than double if we would leave that, if we wanted to continue to provide free meals to people who would normally get them.
Just to piggyback on Keith's comment at the AASA conference in Washington, D.C. a couple weeks ago, Illinois, we had a breakout session on a variety of topics, and this was a hot topic. I mean, Illinois, Minnesota, Kansas, Wisconsin, our entire region, 2 talking points seem to surface about food service, and that is the quantity of food that we're serving at the middle school and especially at the high school. They need to allow more flexibility, because kids aren't getting the quantities they need when they have such a long school day, especially if they're in activities. And then the second point, there's a 3-phase recommendation having to do with the salt content in food. And Betsy, we're already seeing kids make other choices. So if you stand in the high school cafeteria and you notice how many McDonald's bags get delivered during the lunch hour, and I use this example in our breakout, time out. It's not that we don't want healthy food and healthy meals, but what they already have put in place is starting to drive the whole system where we don't want the system to go, so to speak. So another suggestion is where you're able to weigh in legislatively, this becomes national guidelines, but we don't want to lose the whole boat over great intention and good movement. The answer is somewhere in the middle here, and that's clearly what every state was saying. And Keith, you're exactly right. There were districts that were significantly, we are doing very well as I look at the picture nationally compared to where the kids are. And I attribute that to Betsy and the whole staff, and they're creative with it. But they still have to abide by the guidelines. So the food content and the quantity issue, we made a point to talk to all 10 people that represent Wisconsin, and they all heard those 2 talking points. Now, at the end of the day, it goes to conference committee, and the president will ultimately make a decision what he agrees to in those guidelines. But this is happening across the whole nation.
And
I'd
Mark,
be curious to see how many kids that are on the free or reduced lunch program that are actually eating the lunch program.
we have a pretty high
Doing-
participation percentage for those
Okay.
students.
I'm just curious
And I think
about-
it's because they don't have a lot of other options.
But they're
So
eating it though. so
They're
that's
eating it,
good.
yes. So it's good. They're getting a nutritious meal. It is very healthy food that they're getting. It's just the kids who have options are exercising that option more. Mark, to go back to your question, I do know, or have heard a couple districts who have considered going away from that. The ones who usually give it serious consideration or have see any financial possibility of it are the ones that have 5% or less free and reduced lunches. Then you could do it at the percentages that we're at. It financially wouldn't make sense.
What type of percentage do we have?
On average, as a whole, for the district, I believe we're just over 30%.
So I don't think this is a topic for the budget hearing, but it might be worth looking at what our intention is with our food service program. Because if our intention is that no child be hungry in the classroom, and our target audience is free and reduced, then reduced participation rate overall may not be an issue. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But it all goes back to what the intent of the program is. If, in order to be successful, we need an overall participation rate. But I don't think that should be talked about at a
And-
budget hearing.
And yeah,
I don't think this
I
is the
agree.
place to discuss
Yeah,
that.
there's a good discussion that can be had there because there are some students, in my opinion, who don't qualify for free and reduced, but still are in a financial stressful situation, and there's benefit to having cost-effective meals for them as
Right.
well. But you're right. I think that'd be a good board discussion topic to talk about. So the last fund you see on here is Community Service Fund. This is the last year that I believe it will look like this. I think next year you're going to see this fund get larger, and the reason being the pool and auditorium will be built and will be budgeting for operations costs of the new pool and auditorium, and that's an increase in space. And while the new equipment will be more efficient when you've got that much more space to heat, that much more water to heat and clean and put chemicals in and do all those things, we're going to see an increase in our costs associated with the Community Service Fund for those pool and auditorium operational costs. As it is right now, we've kept the levy the same for several years, and we're kind of waiting for that changeover to happen. So with that said, we're looking at total expenditures are up a little bit compared to those unaudited figures. As I mentioned, I expect the numbers for last year to be up, and I'm estimating about $1 million more than what shows, and you see that we're pretty close on our expenditures to what we had last year if we add $1 million to that number. So we'll see a slight increase, but last year this past year we're going to have underspent our budget because we had such a successful year in our health insurance program, and that gets allocated out among all the different accounts that have any staff with insurance. So we had a better than expected year. We will be adding to our fund balance for 2014-15 because we had such a good year with health insurance. And the bottom chart here is, I think, the one that a lot of people are most interested in. That's our total levy. We're going to ask for approval of a proposed levy at the end of the meeting of $19,085,522. That's down just slightly over last year. I really would call it about the same as last year. As I mentioned, I do expect our equalization aid to tick up a little bit when final numbers come out, so that number could change a little bit, but we also have that $100,000 revenue limit exemption, which would offset that. So I anticipate, estimated, we will be close to what we levied last year. So now if we talk Community Service Fund, I spent a little time on that before. One of the requirements for Community Service Fund is that we talk about what's in it and we post it on our website so people know what we're doing. The Community Service Fund is outside of our revenue limit, and the state lawmakers just want to make sure the community is aware and supportive of the things that we're doing in Community Service Fund. So it's things that aren't part of our core education that we're doing that serve the community. So we've got police liaison officers that we split our costs with the village on. We've got pool supplies and repairs on the current older pool. As I mentioned, the supplies cost will probably go up next year just because we're looking at much larger pool and a second pool, but the repairs will go down because it's a new pool. Rec department program and pool utilities. Because we open our buildings up to the community after hours, we have to keep the buildings up to temperature, we have to have lights on, all those things. Year-round, our buildings are used a lot. It's awesome the way our community uses our buildings. There is a cost to it, so we account for that and put that in our Community Service Fund. Elementary and middle school co-curriculars. I hope the community knows, and we need to make sure we're welcoming community members to participate in elementary and middle school co-curriculars even if they are not in our students in our school district. So parochial school students and homeschool students are invited to participate in our co-curricular programs at the elementary and middle school. This was a decision the board made, I believe it was over 10 years ago, to open those up and have those a community resource. So they're run similar to programs run by the Village of Ashwaubenon through the rec department. They're open to other students. And then we have the Ashwaubenon Preschool Parent Learning Program, the APPLE program, that we have services for young parents to help get them prepared and prepare their child for education. So it's a lot of after hours or after school things and a lot of parent support programs there.
The money, the fund balance that, I should back up a second.
You want me to go up?
First of all, do we have a fund balance on this?
We have a fund balance in the community service fund because a lot of the things like the utilities will fluctuate from year to year. The police liaison will fluctuate from year to year. So we do carry a fund balance in there. And so it's got to be used for these programs, but it's not specific. We don't have a fund balance that's specific to, say, police liaison officers. We have a fund balance as a whole in that fund that can be used for any of these programs.
Can we set up a sinking fund in here, like a arbitrary fund balance, if you will?
We definitely can. We can levy. There's no levy limit on this, no revenue limit. So we could levy. Right now, I have proposed a $350,000 levy. We could levy $450,000 and use that extra $100,000 and put it into a separate account and treat it as a replacement fund for something that we see as it can only be used on community service things, and it can't be used to build a building, but it can be used for some repairs or upgrades, things like that, but we couldn't build a new facility in.
Can it be used for renovating?
It could be used for renovations, and this is a tricky one. The states said to a point, and how they define to that point is really going to be our auditor's decision on.
Well, what I've been thinking about here is that I'm just going to take 50,000 as a number. If we put 50,000 in there for the next 3 years, by the time that the pool and auditorium are complete, we have a little bit of money there that we can utilize for redoing the pool area now, the old pool, moving the commons area there, putting this building in there.
Okay, so here's the problem with that. Now you're not using it for something outside of our school's function. So if you're redoing the pool area to make it an educational space, I would say you couldn't use this fund for it. If you were redoing the pool area to make it a community space, then you'd have a better argument that it would fit. Because this is all only for things that are outside of what the school does. So remodeling it for the district office, I don't think there's any way we could make that case.
It's for community.
Remodeling it for the commons.
That's part of the
That's for
school
school.
function. They wouldn't allow, just like they don't
Understand
allow
that.
certain food service functions in there.
Keith, was this levy frozen a couple years ago?
Yes, the last 2 years it was frozen. This year there's not a freeze on it, but we've kept it the same again, kind of in preparation for next year. I anticipate it'll go up with the auditorium and pool. Even construction being in process, we'll need to be heating it and dealing with some of the costs involved with operating those.
So you said building projects it can't do. Go ahead.
I was just thinking if it was gonna freeze, we anticipate it will freeze again. It's kind of like in
Yep.
1993 when
Yep.
you get stuck with a low budget and
Right.
it's with you forever. So we anticipate higher costs with pool utilities even beginning this year. Does it make sense?
I don't think so, because I don't see it being frozen again. I've talked with Senator Coles, actually was the one who proposed the legislation that froze it, and he proposed new legislation that's in effect now where the freeze isn't in place. But what it does is it requires this, at the annual meeting, have this discussion about what's in there, and then it requires our auditors to look at what's in there. In the past, Community Service Fund was really left to the board's discretion on what you put in there. There were rules on what should go in there, but there was nobody checking it. Now, under the current legislation, the auditors check it. If the auditors find that we have something in there that is not appropriate, we really get double hit on it. We're going to lose the aid for that year. We're going to lose the revenue limit for that year. So, say it's a $100,000 item, we're going to lose $200,000 basically out of our budget. So that's their way of keeping us from moving things in that don't belong. But that's in place of the levy freeze, because when I talked with Senator Coles about it, he understood that this was putting districts or who have functions. Some districts run the whole rec department fund, that part that's run out of the village. Some school districts run that. And when you have costs changing and you need to do things, it was really putting districts in a tough spot. So I don't see a levy freeze coming back in the foreseeable future. I think the limits they put in place were meant to take care of the abuse.
So any underages that we had from the referendums and everything, we couldn't put in here?
What's an underage? If it comes in under
Pool
budget?
cover.
Could we pay for a pool cover out of here? That I'd have to look at, but we might be able to. Because we're going to account for the utilities in here, I think we could pay for a pool cover out of here and use the fund balance to pay for a pool cover. So you're right, I hadn't thought about putting that, so we could increase the levy to cover the cost of that. We couldn't, I asked the question about the evacuator system. We cannot put that in because that's part of the building the HVAC system. But the pool cover is something that definitely could be added after a
Scoreboard.
change needs to be done, so I think that would be workable.
What about scoreboard?
Scoreboard? I believe a scoreboard could, because I could strongly make the argument that's really more for the competitive use that the community's using more than the district is.
Starting blocks?
Mhm. I think we could do those things.
That's something that, I don't know if we want to do that tonight, though.
I don't think we have to do it tonight, and as I mentioned earlier, this is all based on estimates. We can have public discussion at board meetings in the future and decide that when you finalize the levy in October, we could make those adjustments. We could determine, we definitely want public input on it, so we want to hear how people feel about it, but we can make those adjustments as part of the final levy certification. We're not locked into the levy that's
I mean,
approved
I wouldn't
tonight.
want to take and abuse it, because, I mean, I understand, it's, would be just, I mean, I don't want to, I want to do what we had told the people we were going to do in the referendum. One way or another, I think that this would save the people, the community, a substantial amount of money for utilities and everything. So, I mean, I don't see it as a waste, if you will. I mean, I think it is a prudent area to put it.
Right. I don't think of it as abuse, and the other thing it does is this is outside the aid formula, so we don't have that negative 50% penalty on it either. Before I want you to approve or have a detailed discussion about this, I want to sit down with our auditor and have that discussion, because
Sure.
he's really the one who's going to make the determination on whether what we put in there is legitimate and we don't get hit for those costs. So they're coming in next week. I can have that discussion, and we could have a board discussion between now and October on what we want to include.
Well, it's either put it in here or we put it in our general budget,
Mhm.
and then it's going to cost us
Right.
the aid hit then too. So, I mean, makes more sense to put it in here. Yeah.
Well, I could make the argument that we have the same aid hit either way, because we're going to spend our revenue limit either way, so we're going to have the aid will be the same. It's doing it in here allows us to get it out from underneath the revenue limit, and we wouldn't have more aid loss, but we'd have the same aid we would have if we did it in our operating
But
fund.
we're not taking it away from.
Not taking it away from
Education.
education. Yes.
I'm just curious too, with the pool, the new pool and the old pool, will the old pool automatically close down when the new pool is built, or are we gonna use both facilities and slowly phase the old pool out? Because then we're gonna have a cost, like, the new pool's gonna be used a lot
Yeah.
for competition, and we have meets and everything there, and now we need the old pool for the park and rec program.
No,
That
the
won't
day
happen?
the day the new pools are open and ready
The
to
old
go,
pool then
the old
closes?
pool will begin draining, because one, the cost of operating the
That's
pool is
what I wanted to
expensive.
know.
Two, the repair cost and things like that. And it's also, for lack of a better term, an attractive nuisance, where if you have a pool, you have to supervise and you have to have things. So the sooner we can shut the pool down, fill it in, the
It'll be
safer we
closed
are.
right away when the new one's
Mhm.
open.
Okay, so here's the detail of the budget. Once again, the new legislation requires that I cover the budget or show the budget, and we have it out on our website. So if you want to know what we're spending on any of these individual areas, and on the revenue side, we have $350,000 in proposed levy. The Family Resource Center, the Apple program, is raising under this budget just over $18,000 to help pay for their costs. And I want to also mention the costs listed here are not all the costs of that Apple program. They do quite a bit of fundraising and do a lot to keep that program going. It really is community supported a lot. So these are the costs that we've covered, and they're raising over $18,000 of it. And then the activity fees for elementary and middle school students go into the community service fund, not our general budget when we charge the activity participation fee. So those fees generate about $6,300. So our total budget is $377,000. We're levying $350,000. Any questions on community service fund before we move off? Okay, so when we look at tax amount, and this is a very busy slide, but it shows all our different levies, but the most important line is the blue line at the top. That's the total levy. So what you'll see is our total levy for 2015-16 being down slightly. Like I said, I consider it about even. I'll remind you again, because I haven't said enough, these are estimates. They will change. This is our best estimate at this point. If you look at the red line near the bottom, that's our long-term debt, and you can see the trend the last couple of years going down, and that's what we'll see for the next 5 years as that long-term debt slowly rolls off the books. And then the bottom line that you see starting in 2006-07, this green line, is the community service fund levy. So if you add the green line, the red line, and the purple line, you get the blue line. So if we look at property values, as I mentioned, we're not seeing huge property value growth, so that's not what's driving our reductions in aid. We're seeing slight growth, and actually for this projection, I don't have the updated numbers from the state. I projected flat. So our mill rate could look a little better if we have some property value growth, because the aid property value is set a year in advance. Our mill rate is based on actual property value when we levy the taxes, so we may see a little better mill rate once we have actual numbers. So then we look at mill rates, and you can see the trend. As I mentioned, 93, 94 was when revenue limits were put in place. We were just below $18 on mill rate. Here we're at about $10. So very stable over the last couple of years, even in light of all the aid reductions we talked about earlier. So here's my disclaimer at the end of the budget presentation. All these numbers will change. These numbers are all based on estimates, and the state numbers have some variability. So general state aid is going to be adjusted. We'll get a final estimate in October. It will be based on actual budget expenditures after audit for every school district they allocate out. I anticipate, because we had a better than budget year, we underspent, we will see a slight increase in our general aid over what I have in this budget. Enrollment, we've got our September counts. We'll see if we actually get the open enrollment students that we're projecting. We'll see if the resident students, or if you remember last year we expected our resident students to be higher than what actuals came in, so we had to change our budget a little bit to balance it. But really, resident students affect us long-term because of the 3-year rolling average that they use in the hold harmless protections and the revenue limit formula. So a reduction in resident students doesn't hit us until the second year. That's why this year our budget we had significant reductions to balance. Equalized values will affect mill rate only. So where our property values go, they affect the mill rate or the cost per thousand that a property owner pays, but it doesn't change our budget at all. Assessed values will affect the actual rates paid, so there's a difference between equalized and assessed. School levy tax credit, that's one of those numbers that people in my profession think the state is mislabeling. They call it a school aid when they give school levy tax credit. It's really money just to reduce property taxes. Never comes to the district. We never see it. They don't even tell us how much it is. I have to call the village to find out what it is. But that will affect the assessed rate that our property owners actually pay. Grants, I put in placeholders because our grants aren't all finalized, and we keep our staffing the same in grants until we have final grant approval. So grants will change, and that will change our total budget, but you'll see revenues and expenditures will move together. So if we get a $100,000 grant, we'll have it. They typically don't allow supplanting, so we have to have new expenses that the grant is funding. It can't fund what we're already doing. And then there'll be some budget adjustments or changes to balance after all these other things when we know where we're finally at. As I mentioned, the $1 million that we're looking at borrowing for the contamination cleanup will free up some money here, but we also, with student counts, we've got a couple grade levels that we are watching very closely, whether we need to add staff, as class sizes are one of our priorities that we're trying to maintain. So there are 2 grade levels in particular that we are concerned about at this point. That's a lot of talking. Anybody have any questions or anything that I could cover more thoroughly?
Good job, Pete.
Okay, that's all I got. Thank you.
Move right into the annual meeting? Right. Okay, we'll adjourn this meeting, or the budget hearing for this 2015. We don't need a motion or anything on that, so just call it. I think we'll move right along into our annual meeting because I think our audience is here that's going to be here, so. I'll call the meeting, the annual meeting for July 27, 2015 to order. Roll call.
Bandy Creek here.
Elron here?
Van Lannon here.
Love to hear.
Williams here. We need to elect a meeting chairperson. Is that? So we'll take nominations on that. Or no, Brian, did you usually do that, or does it make any difference?
Does it need a nomination for Brian?
No,
Or no?
for the chairperson, whoever.
Somebody to run the meeting.
Run the meeting. Okay, I'll nominate Mark.
Second it.
Got a motion, a second. Is there any other nominations? Any other nominations? All in favor of Mark Williams running the annual meeting, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, thank you. Move on to D, approve the 2014-15 annual meeting minutes. Everybody has a copy of them in your book here?
I'll make a motion.
Make a motion to approve the annual meeting?
Yes.
Annual meeting minutes. We have a second.
Second.
Name and address, please.
Yes, Kathy O'Brien, 1293 Old Press.
Hasn't changed from last year. Any other discussion? All those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
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 Opposed? Motion passes. E, Treasurer's Report. You'll see a copy of them on page 23. If you would like, we can have our treasurer read it. Or, sure.
Okay. I'm trying to remember, did we just went through the total equity section, correct? I don't think we went through all the fund balances, or did we, last year?
You read through the whole
Yeah.
thing.
Was it the entire thing?
Yeah.
Okay, we can do that. All right, so for the year ending June 30th, 2015, the fund balance as of July 1st, 2014 for all funds was $6,433,620.66. We would then add receipts from all sources of $38,209,341, and then subtract all disbursements from all sources of $36,817,453, for a total equity, all funds unaudited as of June 30th, 2015 of $7,825,508.66. As far as fund balances go, in Fund 10, General Fund, has a balance of $7,079,837.29. Fund 20, Special Projects Fund, has a balance of $107,919.80. Fund 30, Debt Service Fund, has a balance of $262,192.64. Fund 40, Capital Projects Fund, has a zero balance. Fund 50, Food Service Fund, has a balance of $250,845.67. Fund 80, Community Service Fund, has a balance of $124,713.26. Again, balancing the total equity in all funds at $7,825,508.66.
It's a lot of numbers. Any questions for Mr. Vandekreek?
Ted Hool, 2851 Bluefield Lane. That hasn't changed either way.
Yeah. Do we take a motion on that, so we're approving it, and, no, we're okay? Sorry, I'm supposed to ask him a question, and you don't get to do that very often. Thanks, Ted. F, continuous improvement plan, district goals.
Okay, I'll just report out on our continuous improvement plans and district goals. I'm going to start, really reference also our work that we did last week and reference a board workshop coming up in August as well. So as you notice, we're continuing our focus with the same two main areas. And with the board's input, we'll solidify our CI details, which will carry right into next month when we have our board workshop. We continue to focus on math and literacy with also a side goal to enhance our internal communication. And that has to do with regard to instructional practice. We have a number of staff leaders also at the middle school and at the high school this coming year. They're interested in also helping us lead what we've referred to over the past year as this gradual release of instruction training. So we'll see not only administrative leadership, but we're branching out to more staff leaders to lead that initiative. I want to give a huge thanks to Jill and our leadership team, all of our administrators, just on the work that's been put into these goals, not only this past year, but for the past several years, and just the work that we're doing to better use individual student data and move individual student performance forward, regardless of where students are on the spectrum. So last week, for 2 days, the leaders met and they learned about what's called evidence-based leadership. And we developed recommendations. You'll hear about the details of that next month. These recommendations are from the key results that were identified through the survey that a lot of you participated in. That's really where the communication goal surfaced as we worked those 2 days. So besides the math and leadership area, we think we can really enhance that goal. So I'm going to mention about 5 bullet points, just to kind of nutshell what went into 2 days of a lot of good work, a lot of discussion last week. So number 1 is identifying a long-term goal. We've identified these goals, as I just mentioned, and we'll be reporting out on those from a macro perspective after grades 5, 8, and 11. That's what's suggested right now. So these recommendations are going to align to our prior years in terms of reading. We'll also look at individual benchmarks at each building, and we'll be breaking those out. So it's not that we're only reporting out 5, 8, and 11, but we will be looking at every grade level to drill down more in depth and more frequently monitoring what we're doing, kind of in a nutshell. It's a good way to maybe say that. Number 2 is creating a focus around this area of improving communication. Really, that is zeroing in more on the culture of student achievement, on what we do, how we do it, how we reflect on that. And it's not that communication is broke. I think that's an important thing to understand here. It's taking us at a certain level and seeing if we can even do a better job of that. I heard comments about district to building communication. We can do some things that are better than that. An example of that day is we'll be making a mindful reflection monthly when we meet, and I'll be putting that on the agenda. How are we doing? Where are we with that? Just some things that will take us, I hope, another step forward in an area like communicating at all levels. I'll go on to another one here. Building continuous improvement plan for all operational departments. Now this is different for us because in the past we focused on math and literacy. Now we'll be looking at the food service department in goal setting, the maintenance department in goal setting, and whatever else we choose to put, maybe HR in Jody's area. We'll be looking at things like maybe employee retention and where are we compared to where we were 3 years ago. And obviously there's an area we've noticed a big change in terms of applications. Where we used to get 150 applications for a job. I talked to Chris a couple weeks ago. We hired a middle school science teacher. We had 25 applications. I think it's the result of some of the climate in the last couple of years in the profession. So we need to be forward thinking on those areas and try to find ways to grow those departments. And I think what's really nice about this is it focuses on even the area of technology. It focuses on those individual departments much more so where we build in more accountability with one another. So another one is just aligning our ongoing development of school continuous improvement plans to our district's recommended targeted measures. So it's drilling even deeper than we have in the past with more frequent check-ins. And then the last one is our next step. We're asking for your involvement and your input to challenge this. We'll do a board workshop. Melissa will actually come in and she will unfold and roll out what we've done over the 2 days, the data that surfaced, and ask for your approval, your input. We really want you to challenge that now that we have a bigger bucket of data, so to speak, for you to weigh in on. Doing a lot of things very well. It's that good to great or great to even better. Just pushing that envelope, push the needle forward with all of us in a way that we can be even more transparent and enhance communication. You know how that is when we do a survey, and out of our, we used to be called Meet and Confer, we call it Communication and Collaboration Committee. That's where we have staff members from every building represented, and we meet quarterly. Last year, we decided at the last meeting, could we just do a survey and ask what's working and what areas do we need to improve? Well, I compiled all of that data. That data also was shared with Studer. And out of that, one of the main goals that surfaced is basically around the area of communication, without spending a lot of time here tonight going into every detail on that. So that's where the communication piece comes out of this, but as well as staff development was another area that surfaced out of that. And right away, a group of teachers working with Jill, they're personalizing staff development. You'll hear more about that as well. That's something we'll be rolling out at the Welcome Back for Teachers, so they can have more options, more autonomy in the area of staff development. It's really hard to create staff development where one size fits all. We've been trying to do it, I think, for years in education. I don't know if we'll ever totally get there, but there's some real creative ideas that are being put on the table now in terms of people growing and learning. I think we all know in terms of motivation and development, individually we will grow and take a step forward if we really truly own and have a desire to want to grow. So we need to create those types of options versus just forcing X on a collective group and expecting that one size to fit all. Obviously we have a lot of different groups to represent here, from school psychologists to teachers to fine arts to, the whole gamut. So that's something I give Jill and Jamie and a lot of other leaders in the district credit for. They're creating a website with options. We're trying to utilize the talent within the district that we have so that people can share in areas where they have areas of expertise, but warehouse that all on one site so that if teacher X is really good at assessment practices, they're more prone to learn and get information from somebody they know and they work with in the classroom sometimes, much more so than just attending a workshop and moving forward. So I don't want to steal the thunder. They're going to roll that out come the beginning of the school year. That will be one of our first in-service days when the teachers come back. But I wanted to give you a little prelude of sort of what went on those 2 days, and as you reflect on this, if you have questions, ask any one of us, any one of the leaders or the food service. We had everyone represented, the coordinators, the directors, and all administrators. And for part of the day, the coordinators met with Keith and 2 Studer representatives. That's really a change. I think it's a welcome change for that group of individuals because, frankly, we haven't been giving those departments the leadership and help that they really deserve, and to help grow us in that district and in that area that we just haven't. It's just a matter of resources and time. But it'll be interesting, I guess, going forward a year from now after we do this. Remember, it's a 1-year contract that we have with Studer, and we all need to be honest and reflect on that. And I want to say, I know the principals, number of people, when I met one-on-one with people, reported out the concern about there is so much on the plate right now, given mandates and requirements, that it's our challenge to keep the focus and to not necessarily add a lot more, but to streamline and really take what we're doing currently and get better at it. And so then it shouldn't surprise you to see the same focus with math and literacy on the table. There have been improvements, but we still look at, especially at the gaps in achievement in different areas, we can clearly do a better job. And we'll continue to work, at doing that, but hopefully with some other professional advice on how we can better report that and support one another to do that. So I know it was a more lengthy report this year, but I wanted to give you the update on how we spent the last couple of weeks. We also learned at the end of the second day that it's not how you fall, but it's how you get up. And that was our broom ball activity. That was quite an experience for a lot of people. At the very end, we put everyone together and we played broom ball for about an hour. Brian Haynes realized that that's not necessarily the most safe activity in the world. We had a few bruises, and I'll be honest, I was pretty nervous as that unfolded, but we adjusted and everybody made it out okay. But I had no idea it was that physical, to be honest with you. I didn't envision broom ball to be that physical, so I have a different idea in mind next year. It's soccer golf, and that will be a much safer option. So, good team, good sports, and we had a busy couple of days, and there's just a lot for us to reflect on as we're looking ahead here and prepare for another school year. So that's the end of my lengthy report.
Any questions
Questions or comments or anything?
so far? We'll get a good flavor for it next month's meeting, so. But, thank you.
You're welcome.
We'll move on to G, remuneration for school board members. Compensation. You want to handle this, Brian?
I would. I would just like to open. I call your attention to the board minutes from last year. That sets the levels. Put that in front of me. 21. It gives you an idea on where the levels are, and I would certainly entertain a motion to address board compensation.
The numbers listed there, what was previously, they went up 1.5%, which puts the president at 4,407, and everyone else at 3,791.
Do we have any motions or recommendations for board compensation? This is a noisy group. Mr. Abinger?
I would make a motion that the board salaries increase the same percentage as the professional and support staff.
Okay. 1.62%.
So the motion is to increase based on the same level as the support staff, which is 1.62%. Do we have a second?
No, I said professional and support staff.
It's all, they were all the same. Same.
Professional and support staff, that would be 1.62. So we have a motion on the floor. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, we got a second by, okay, we have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries for an increase of 1.62%, same as the professional and support staff. All right.
Okay, thank you very much. Go H, vote taxes sufficient to support operation of schools, transportation, sites, buildings, and maintenance and capital outlay as presented in the proposed budget as follows. Operating fund, debt service, and community service fund. I believe that total isn't it 31?
Nope, 19,085,522.
What he said.
Capital Brand, 1293 Old Crest. I so moved.
Okay, do we have a motion, we got a second?
I'll second it. This looks like 1319 Oak Crest Drive.
We have a motion and a second to, approve the 19,085,522. Any discussion? All those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Thank you very much. Aye, establish date, time, and location for next year's annual meeting and budget hearing.
July 25th.
July 25th? Is our new auditorium going to be done by then? I'd like to have it there. I'd like, if it's going to be done, I'd like to have it there.
That's a possibility.
It's possible. I have a hard meeting tonight at this point.
Well, let's set it for 25th, and we'll tentatively set it for there then. If it's not done, we can come back here.
3 years late.
You don't need a motion on it, do we?
I would make a motion.
We did, do we have it before? Yeah, we did.
Need a motion for next year's meeting?
Yeah.
I'll make the motion.
I'll second it.
We have a motion and a second for having next year's budget hearing and annual meeting, July 25th at the high school auditorium.
6,
If
do you want
it's
a time?
new, 6 o'clock. If the new auditorium is done. All in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. J, such other legally permissible matters as may be brought forward before the meeting. Anybody have anything else that they'd like to bring up? Buy some land or something, or give us a bunch of money? No?
Good try. Nice, gotta ask.
Yeah. If not, I'll take a motion for adjourning.
So moved.
Second.
Got a motion by Brian, second by Mike. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you very much. It'll take 5 minutes and we'll start the regular meeting.
I can vote on my son's resignation. I can vote on my son's resignation. What? I can't I? I can vote against it if I could.
Fell to third. Come on.
So I don't think it matters if I vote for that, do you think?
Now you're just messing. I quoted
It's not like I'm married.
Donald Trump there, told him
Yeah,
he
I
was
don't think
fired.
it's a big deal, unless that's really bad.
It's up to you.
I don't think it's any big deal.
Okay. Good evening. I'd like to call the regular school board meeting for Monday, July 27, 2015 to order. Roll call, please.
Bandy Creek here.
Power here?
Van Lannon here.
Martha here.
Williams here. We have a quorum. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Is there any additions or corrections to the agenda? We have this one that you on your by your chair here this evening. It's two of them on there.
Consent items.
Consent agenda items, yes. So do we have a motion to
So moved.
approve the agenda?
Second.
Got a motion second to approve the agenda. All in favor of the motion, please say aye.
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 Opposed? Motion passes. F, citizens and or delegations. Is there anybody here this evening that'd like to speak to anything that's not on the agenda? Anything that's not on the agenda? Sure? Okay, we'll move on to G, which consists of the consent agenda is the minutes of the regular meeting held on Monday, June 22nd. Number 2, the minutes of the executive session held on Monday, June 22nd. This 3, scheduled checks written 6/16 to 7/20. Staffing, resignation of Ashley Anverlink from her grade 2 instructor position at Valley View. New hire of Ruth Fazzini to full-time pupil services program coordinator, the district here. Number 3, hire of Lissa Anderson to a full-time grade 3 instructor at Valley View. Resignation of Colin Lauka from his noon duty supervisor position at Valley View. And number 5, co-curricular contracts, 133 of them, plus the hire of Michael Smits to a grade 8 science instructor at Parkview, and the hire of Kathleen Pluteman to .53 FTE Title I Literacy Limited Term Instructor at Parkview.
I make a motion to approve the consent agenda with one correction, and that's item G2, or G2, item B1, it's a correction of dates and a motion.
Second.
You got a motion, a second? It's, if you looked at the G2, it's,
That's what I was just looking at.
I seen you look a little quizzical over there, that's why I stopped for a second, but,
Because these were what is?
there's just a flip-flop with some dates in here
Oh,
that's,
okay.
that
That's
has to
all
be
it is.
corrected, yeah. We motion a second, all those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. H, Superintendent's Report.
Okay, first thing listed there is work camp appreciation. I want to thank Mr. Obinger and the Ashwaubenon Press, as well as an article. If you didn't see either of these articles, I'm just going to route them. There were articles featuring the work camp, which was a camp of about a little over 400 youth involving other adults from various churches throughout not only Wisconsin, but as far away as Maine and throughout the United States, basically. Just want to can't underemphasize the amount of work and effort that went into about a year and a half of planning, and the leadership from Mr. Schmidt, from Tom, the buildings and grounds, Chris and Brian, Betsy, and about, oh goodness, 12 food service people that worked 2 different shifts, served a lot of the homes throughout the Green Bay community, and some pretty emotional stories came out of that. How the lives have really been impacted by a lot of people. And I want to thank everybody that agreed to participate in this. The very first day was a little bit painful. They ran out of coffee in like 20 minutes with a 120 coffee cup maker. They made some adjustments, the food trucks, the deliveries. The cost and impact, this was not, someone asked me earlier this week, was this a fundraiser, how much did we make? This was not a fundraiser for the school district. Our goal is to certainly just break even with this. And what I do plan to do, they have already asked, could they come back in a few years? And that's gonna, I want that to be a decision made by a lot of people. I really wanna know, at the end of the day, after Parkview is cleaned, after the dust settles, to get people together, and we'll entertain that discussion at that point. I really wanna know, as far as we know, there was no negative impact on our facilities, but I also wanna make sure that the building's up and running and comfortably for Parkview, because that's the only building that's air conditioned. It was the logical site, and it also impacted summer school from the standpoint of they couldn't actually hold the camp until summer school was completed. But the positive side of that was very neat. So I'm going to share a couple pictures. Pictures worth a million words. They even got Jordy Nelson in this one picture here. This is a picture of the gym with all of the adult workers and the 400 students. And then this is a picture of their immediate staff. And I also want to ask Chris Husick if you come forward for a second. Please. I want to present to Chris a work camp plaque presented to Parkview Middle School to both Chris and Brian for your willingness. You had to walk in those classrooms. I can't even characterize. Obviously, it didn't look like a school. It reminded me of one summer I marched in a drum corps and we slept on gym floors. We didn't use classrooms at that time. But imagine, the second floor of Parkview was the male area, 17, 18, 19 cots in a classroom. And you can imagine, the lockers were open. They were drying their towels in the hallway. It was a sight to behold. All I can say is you had to see that to really appreciate what went on. What was it, 6 days? I think they came on a Sunday and they left on a Saturday morning. And they had their breakfast. The food service kitchen prepared all of their lunch meals or bag lunches. They went off, they worked all day, and then they'd come back and have a dinner, and then they had a program in the gym with live music. So the gym was not really a sleeping area at all. It was more of their gathering area. So very hard to characterize this by just showing you a few pictures, but let's give Chris and the Parkview staff a big round of applause. You deserve
I think
it.
it'll have to go to, for sure, our maintenance crew and the kitchen staff, because they were there like every day. I went for a tour the second day, and when I walked in, I saw bikinis strung on the wash line along the lockers, and I'm like, what is going on? I mean, I knew why they were there, but I'm like, what's the need for bikinis? And apparently, they were wearing them with towels back and forth to the shower area each night as they would go shower. So, but it was amazing, and I know that Willie and Lois got to meet many of them, and they had a great time and sent me an email saying what an awesome week it was. We did joke about taking pictures of teachers' classrooms and sending them to them to stress them out a little bit, but we did it. The classrooms were insane.
They wouldn't believe it. Trust me, they wouldn't believe it.
Thank you for this.
It's deserved, Chris. I didn't list this other one, but I just wanted to also thank Maria and Colleen Hansen, our other summer school coordinator this summer. This number keeps going up in my mind. We had 1,163 students attend summer school. We had 72 high school volunteers. We had 17 in-district staff, support staff help us, 7 out of district. We had 84 total staff teach summer school this summer. 62 were in district and 22 of them were out of district. What I think is really neat to note is we keep getting better and we're offering more and more things at summer school. We already have another meeting planned this week to look at what else we can do, particularly at the middle school and high school level, to augment summer school. We'll have discussions about things like offering Phi-Ed during the summer, even entertaining, and I had asked the board just to be open to the concept, short-term, long-term, of how could we even offer more core area courses down the line to expand offerings for kids that want advanced placement courses, or maybe they want technical college time, release time to start working early and preparing them for the world of work. But Maria and Colleen, thank you. A ton of work, a busy summer, and we just keep getting better. So thank you for all the work on summer school. I think I had Studer listed on there. You listened to me talk at length about Studer, so I don't think I need to get into that unless you have other questions. I did want to ask the board and invite you, certainly again, if it works in your work schedule, August, did I have that? The 15th? No, that's the
27th.
the welcome back is the 27th. That's a Wednesday that week, and pretty much the same routine. I think we have breakfast at 7:30, and then when breakfast is over, we get everyone in the auditorium, we have the welcome back.
Brian, that date is actually the 26th.
The 26th, I stand corrected.
But it's a Wednesday?
It is a Wednesday, sorry, is my error. August 26th, the Wednesday. If you're available, if you just let us know, or you can just, obviously you could just come too. I mean, there's nothing, you know, I think you know what the routine is that morning. We'd love to have you there if you're able to be there. Come and meet some of our new staff. And then just a reminder to the public, on August 15th, that's Saturday, starting at 11 in the morning, we have the 50th celebration. Huge thanks to Brad Taylor, to Mark Williams, and the entire planning team. You're seeing posters. I'm hearing a lot more people in the village starting to talk about this. People that have been around for a long time. There will be 3 different bands performing. We'll have food, we'll have music. I know the Optimist Club's going to be busy with selling corn. There will be free swimming at Ashwaubenon Park, and we'll have games and events for the kids in addition to that. So should be a great community event. I don't know if there's anything more you want to share about it, Mark.
Anybody that's interested in donating a few hours of time and helping out Jaguar backers and selling some food or corn or anything or whatever, we're more than willing to take them. So we need over 100 volunteers for that day. So and we just talked about it today. We had another meeting today. I mean, it's been a lot of meetings. So, but it's coming along good. Great group of guys. A lot of people passionate about this.
Excellent. That's all I have. Any questions or comments?
No? Good, thanks. We'll go on to discussion item 1, building projects update.
What I just want to report out on that is the project bids for the community center did come in a little bit over bid, as I understand it, but not significant. And everything's, all systems go for the community center. At this point, Mike, do you know if the bids have actually been posted now for the pool and the auditorium? Are they?
They went out, I think, today or tomorrow. One of the two.
Okay, and then my understanding is we're expecting them back sometime around the end of August, right?
August 19th.
August 19th. So we're hopeful that a lot of people did a lot of work to get us, in the target area. And we appreciate what the village has done as far as using some of the Oneida funds and what the village board has designated towards that project. If needed, we're hoping we don't really even need that dollar amount given where the bids come in. So that's really, we're hopeful that we can get the project started, maybe sometime early September, and get a shovel in the ground if the bids go well. Just want to give the public an update on where everything is with both projects.
Bids go through for the community center tomorrow to the village board, so at least one project will get off the ground here.
Excellent.
So,
Good.
any questions on that? Anybody? Okay. Number 2, Clipstein Park contamination remediation options. Keith.
Okay, we've talked about the remediation between the high school and the middle school, and as you know, there's a second area of remediation, which is at Kirchmer Field, going down to the community center into Clipstein Park. We own part of that land, the village owns part of that land. Village is kind of taking the lead on the planning side of what's going to be done, what needs to be done. They're working with the same design firm that we are, Rettler, to put together the plan. That plan is a little bit behind our plan as far as timeline goes, but they're getting ready to go out to bid on that. And we had discussions with the village, and both decided we needed to go to our boards and talk about how we're going to share in the cost, because it is jointly owned. We own about 1/3 of Ed Kirchmer Field, and the village owns about 2/3. The highest concentration areas are closer to the schools, so that really, it falls into our property. The property line does not make logical sense. The village owns part of the land that the physical building of the middle school is on. So at the end of this project, one of the things we're going to do with the village is try to clean up the property lines and clarify who owns what and get that set. But it just goes to show that it's never been an issue how well the village and school district have always worked together, because no one really cared that where the property line was between the village and school district. We just all worked together and shared and taken care of it. With that said, one of the big questions after we talk a little about are we willing to share in the cost, which I assume we are, we own part of the land, is what do we want to put there? There's the current baseball field that's there is not large enough to be used for varsity baseball. With where the existing community center building is, you can't move the fence back far enough to make it workable for varsity baseball. But it still would be usable for freshman and even JV baseball. So the question is, do we rebuild a baseball diamond there, or do we not, or do we support doing that? And by support, I mean financially support it. Will we do that? If we remediate the space and make where the baseball field is currently simply green space, so grass that could be used for Phi Ed programs, it could be used for other things, but not make a baseball diamond there. If we split the costs 50-50, the district's portion of that project would be $400,000 to cover the baseball field area and all the way up against the middle school. The village still would have more costs than $400,000 because they have some other things that get into the band shell and the parking lots and some of those other things for the community center. If we put a baseball diamond on, the costs are approximately $800,000. Now, none of this has gone out to bid, so we don't have firm costs. These are the estimates from Rattler. So the first question for you as a board to discuss is, how do you feel about sharing in the cost? Does 50-50 seem reasonable to you? Where do you feel about sharing costs? And the second question is, how do you feel about sharing the cost on making it a baseball field again versus just sharing the cost and not making it a baseball field and making it green space?
I've had conversations on both sides with the couple hats that I wear, and seen the Rattler report and everything. I don't think we've got a copy of it as this board. Some of the stuff that's on this report, you know, the demolition of and erosion control of, you know, the different areas, middle school common areas, demolition, amenities, site landscaping, contingency fund. Those are things that we would have to, as a school district, I believe, help fund in one way or another. There's some, like Keith had said, that the parking lots are more for the community center and historical society that's going to take over the old community center parking lots. That's not on the school district property. The village board is going to have to decide whether they're going to go ahead with the band shell as proposed by Rattler, putting down in there, because that's where concerts in the park is and everything. Changing on some playground equipment and that sort of thing. But the baseball diamond, the projections are about $300,000 to put a new baseball field back in there. I talked to Keith about it this afternoon, whether we think we should, you know, can we put this off? I mean, can we put the baseball field off at this time until we can recover from all this remediation and everything, and then determine as from the village, AYB, village, park department, you know, working together on at a date down the road here. He suggested that it's probably going to be too costly and you don't want to go through that again because of the DNR contamination issues that you're going to run into, especially if you put in lighting. Lighting is not included in this $300,000 either.
That's what that was the question I was going to ask.
So you have to add that on top of that besides that. I don't think AYB, from the discussions that I've had and heard and everything, that AYB is in a position to, they said that they would be interested in funding it, or helping, I think. But they, with everything that they just did at Ashwaubenon, they're really not in a position to do it right now. I don't know if, Nick, have you heard anything different from that?
Similar.
Problem is that we need 2 baseball fields in the village. we got one at the Ashwaubenon, and we have one temporary facility out at Cornerstone right now. And that's with a temporary mound in place and infield redone a little bit so that they can play out there. So I mean, one way or another, we need another baseball field. Either we got to spend some money at Cornerstone to put the other diamond out there, or we put Ed Kirchmar Field back in where it was, and who's going to be playing on the second diamond is not the varsity, like Keith has said, but your freshmen and JV, Babe Ruth leagues and stuff that they have, because there's not enough, there's too much usage on the one diamond that you need two diamonds. So I didn't get a chance. I tried calling Rex a couple times this afternoon, and I couldn't touch base with him because he's running around or doing something. So I mean, I haven't had a chance to, talk to him about that. I'm torn. I know that we need the baseball diamond, but I don't know financially if I can do it right now for, spending another $150,000.
Yeah.
We'll just
Question,
interject that I know Rex is, we met out there with Coach Kilp and talked about what it would take at Cornerstone to make that a permanent freshman JV Babe Ruth diamond at Cornerstone. And I know he's getting some cost on that with permanent mound, some better drainage, better dugouts for baseball, expanded fencing for safety and foul balls, and some other sprinkler system, even
Some
to
sprinkler system modifications. There's sprinkler
modification,
system.
correct,
Right.
what it would cost to do grass infield compared to the dirt. The dirt is fine, would you want grass? So I know he's just looking at different options, what it would cost out there, and then have that comparison for what it would cost here.
so here's a question, when there's a varsity baseball game, do they bring JV or freshmen the same night?
Yes.
This past year, we played a early game and a late game, played a 4:30 game and a 7-ish game
Okay.
For the high school. So out at Ashwaubenon.
At Ashwaubenon.
Our freshmen played out at Cornerstone, sometimes all three on the same night.
Okay.
If we had Kirchmeier Field, you could play the JV here, and the varsity out at Ashwaubenon, and both played at 4:30. So students are done earlier.
And are the games out at Cornerstone, when they're played out there, are those done before the adult leagues begin?
They were, yes.
They were all done?
Yep.
Okay. Because I have a real concern about putting a youth baseball program diamond in an adult setting where there's alcohol.
All the high school, all the freshman games were done before there was any co-ed softball or softball. AYB.
Yeah, I don't know what
I'm
they
not
would
for
do in
sure
the
with
summertime. but-
AYB.
See, I wouldn't think they would be in favor of that.
I think it's a no-brainer for us to share in the cost as far as remediation, because we own some of the property and it's the right time, everything's there to take care of that. It's the issue of the ball line.
Can I ask another question? From an orientation standpoint, it's never been all that great having it, base foul balls always flying up on the roof at Parkview or back into the parking lot. One thought, and I don't know if it's been discussed, of turning the field, if it's one is built, so that the home plate area is basically where right field is or was previously, so that you could utilize a concession stand that's already there versus having that old one that should have been torn down 10 years ago.
Either way, the old one gets torn down.
Good.
Rattler did look at options for reconfiguring and turning it. There is not one that fits.
Nothing
You'd be
fits.
breaking windows.
Home plate by right field, you'd have a smaller diamond than what you had previously, and a fair amount
Okay.
smaller. We looked at, could you move home plate back just to create a bigger diamond? There isn't enough space to do that. And you're right, it's not with the school building right there, there's some issues with having it the way it is, but with the old community center building staying in use, there just isn't a way to move that, because if you move out to right field, now that's down one of your baselines and is gonna be in the way to how you configure it, so there isn't a good way to do it.
So did I miss something? The old community center is staying?
Yeah, the,
Really?
Historical Society's gonna use it.
I had not heard that.
Yeah, I didn't
That's news. I was gonna say that, it seemed like it
Historical
would make sense to.
Society's gonna go through a fundraising project, where they're at right now, the village has accepted offer to sell that building to those developers that are right there, that are gonna put that money towards the Historical Society, but then they'll have to raise some more money besides that to expand the building and do the modifications needed to house them there. So, I mean, and that's gonna be happening soon as well. Made more sense to move that there and reallocate those dollars at that site because it works.
Okay.
I don't know, is there anything you want to add to that, Mike?
Yeah, it's a contingency, it hasn't been decided yet. There's no vote by the Historical Society to accept the building yet.
Okay,
I don't wanna get too far ahead before I get in trouble.
sure.
So that's supposed to be discussed at a later date, sometime this week. But, the rest of it you stated was correct. The board, ones I've talked to, are having a hard time because the diamond, even if you do it the way, you just said, was closer to 400,000 when we talked to them. And it wasn't lit.
Right.
And the minute you put it up, it went lease. So you can add another 100,000 to that. So you're up to 500,000.
So
By
what,
the time you're done.
what would it take, or what, the deficiencies that that diamond had, how much too short was it for a varsity diamond?
Oh, I think center field's 300, 290, 300, and
Needs to be what?
380.
Okay, so about 80 feet, so it would
Schwab
have to
makes
go.
400.
Okay,
I would have a hard time believing even that of a JV or freshman team playing there anymore. Just because of the speed of the game has changed so much, the velocity of the bats, the balls coming off the bats, the balls are better, the bats are better, the kids are more equipped.
Mhm.
It's just a dangerous situation.
At Cornerstone, there was not for the freshmen that played there, there was not oh my gosh, every ball that's hit is going over the fence. And Cornerstone's at
300.
300, 206, right? 300 maybe down the line, and
Yeah.
300 in the center, set up for softball. So for that freshman level,
That was
Cornerstone is
okay.
not a huge concern. You start playing JV out there, you might see it uptick a little bit in long balls, but I don't know.
That's not a bad thing.
It's exciting.
Yeah. But you have, that field is bigger though, too. You have more space on the, in the fall
Sides.
territory.
Correct, at Kirchmann.
At Kirchberg.
At Kirchmann,
But it's so much shorter.
correct.
The only way to get length, Jay, is to take down a significant amount of trees.
Right. I mean, literally, they could hit the ball and hit the fence and only get a single at Kirchberg Field because of the
Right.
shortness of that field.
Depends how fast you are.
yeah.
Well, do we know the cost on renovating or whatever you have to do out at Cornerstone?
Rex
I
is,
don't know.
Rex is
Rex is
supposed
supposed
to
to
be
be
working
working
on
on
that.
that.
Did you hear anything, Mike, from him today?
Yeah,
or-
I'm pretty sure it's under 500,000. I'd be pretty sure.
I would be so.
Yeah, it sure would be nice to be able to get a field on the campus. So I think the soccer program has certainly enjoyed having games on the campus, better crowds and better participation, versus nothing against Cornerstone, but having it right at the school makes a big
Well, they
difference.
don't play all the
I
games there.
find that
I
an
know.
interesting comment, Brian, because we stuck $1 million from the village into Cornerstone.
I didn't
Have a
say that
soccer
was a
goal.
mistake. I'm just
No,
saying
no.
that the team
But I'm saying
and the
it's a
players
mistake
enjoy.
because you move the soccer playing to the turf field.
Right.
And now we have one that we're renting out to people outside the village, to you,
Yeah.
because we have no need for it.
In the fall, our
So I don't want to do it again.
In the fall, our boys play at Cornerstone and will remain at Cornerstone.
That's a good thing, 'cause The girls do.
because of the traffic on Gulls Field
Yeah.
in the spring, the girls have said, hey, let's go here. Nothing
better
against
field.
Cornerstone. It's weather related
Yeah.
for the most part.
Better footing and safer for the kids.
It's- Exactly. In the fall, that Cornerstone is lush and green and
Mhm.
set to be played in.
Mhm.
Spring is a little bit more challenging.
Yep.
I don't know if this is a big topic, but if we take the ball diamond out, does Ed's name go somewhere else or?
Well,
dissolves?
we'll have to figure
We've had
that
that
out.
discussion with the village, and I think it would.
Yes.
Oh.
And can someone refresh my memory, were there plans for Clipstein of some sort of health-related or fitness-related something? And if they had that green space, would that be helpful to that, or no?
It's a walking trail that was through our grant that we got, that will be going in there, but with everything else that's happening, they're just put it off a little bit, and I think they got some of the equipment bought and it's sitting there until the trail gets put in.
Would it be helpful to have that green space if we,
The trail could be expanded, I'm sure. But I mean, it's workout stations around the outside of it is what it is.
I see, okay.
So.
I'm not an expert on baseball, I don't know which is the better field. I mean,
Well,
sure.
we can't make a decision on this tonight anyways, we got it listed as a discussion item. I mean, I think it would be helpful for us to get the numbers from Rex and see what that is first before, and it hasn't been gone for the village board either. They don't have it's not on their agenda tomorrow night, I don't believe either, is it? So,
I
I
can't-
mean, if we get a little more information on this and bring it back, we don't wanna surprise anybody on it, but, you know, if you go past there now, there's a mountain of dirt on there. So,
Is the level, when it's all covered and contained, is it going to be level with the, say, the track level? Or is it
think
gonna
it's a
drop
foot.
down still?
It's gonna go up a fair amount, because they're gonna move some of the sludge in there and then cap it, so the field level now will be higher
Higher than
than what we do.
higher
what it
than
is
the
now.
track?
Higher than it is now. I don't think it'll be higher than the track, but higher than it is now.
Okay.
but the village is, through the stormwater utility is building some retention ponds.
Right.
And hauling that dirt from those ponds to several different sites, one of them being Kirchmar Field. That saves us a considerable amount of money
Yep.
as far as this remediation. So, I mean, if you go past there, it's a big pile.
It's huge.
We're gonna have a big ski hill there. that's gonna, you know,
Perfect.
so.
What about your topic about FIAD? Do they need space? Do they need green space? Because you said that was another option for that. Is that a need?
I think when you look at the size of our campus for the number of students between the high school and middle school, we have an exceptionally small campus for practices, for FIAD use, for all those things. Now we have a turf field that can be used a lot more than what the old field could, so that's helped. But then we're taking away the Ridge Road side of the high school now with the construction that'll be going on, and there'll be less space over there. So can it be used? Yes. Is it needed? I would say yes. Would it be used if it was a baseball diamond? I think they'll find ways to use it. It's just not as usable as a baseball diamond as it is if it were just a grass field.
I can honestly say that I couldn't see, if you did this project out at Cornerstone, being more than $100,000. We redid Diamond 2 at Pioneer. We ripped all the fence out. We put sod in, we put concrete in for our batting cages, and that was about $80,000.
Yeah, I think the number is quite a bit less than 100,000 from the preliminary discussions I had with Rex before they met with the baseball coach about what things Rex saw that needed to be done. It wasn't even 50,000.
Yeah, it would be significantly
Ballpark
less.
guess.
You could
But,
sod that infield and it's still,
but then you're putting 13, 14, and 15-year-old boys out in an alcohol environment.
but there's no alcohol being served at that time when they're playing. And as far as Babe Ruth is concerned,
But
that's
they
up to
play
the
Babe
village.
Ruth. They play Babe Ruth though, what, 2 or 3 nights a week, right?
That's up to the village.
So are they gonna not
They
play?
did it this year, Mark.
I don't care if they did it this year, but if you got 13-year-old kids out
Well,
where there's adults
Obviously, that's not
drinking
our
beer.
concern here. Our concern is the high school program. And I honestly couldn't support putting that money into the high school, or into Ed Kirchmeyer field.
Yeah, and I'm not sure I support it either, just given that we are way low on green space, but I don't necessarily like the kids playing with the adults, because I've seen how some of those games go. So that's maybe take
Could
that
be a
back to the
topic.
village.
That's a village,
I'll
that's a
tell you
village
one thing though,
concern.
because I used to play out there, and the village is really tight on watching people who drink. And if you drink and then play ball, you're not welcome back in the league. I've seen them kick teams out,
That's good.
so be careful.
Okay, well, once we get those numbers from Rex next time, if we bring it back and we can make it an action
Yeah.
item probably.
Without action, just get a general, is there anybody who didn't support sharing in the cost with the village equally on the area? Seems like everybody was supportive of that. It's at what level we go.
Right, and I'm wondering, the numbers that you were quoting included a lot of things, like the scope of project. I guess I would want to
The
know.
numbers I put in my summary were just the
Just
things
that.
that dealt with the area adjacent to the middle school and the baseball field.
Okay,
So I included a little of the contingency in some of this other site work and landscaping, but I didn't include the band shell or the parking lots, all
Right,
those things.
okay.
And my numbers, this will shock you, were a little conservative. I made sure we had enough so you wouldn't have an unpleasant surprise.
The total project cost, for just the stuff on Kirchmore Field is around $800,000, $750,000 to $800,000. Our portion of it is about $400,000.
400 to not do the baseball field.
To not do the baseball field.
And we're throwing that out there because even though a third of it is school district property, the property that is the most contaminated, which will be the most costly to remove and truck out, happens to be right by the school on our property. That's the reason for the
Yeah.
50-50 giving.
Is that
Just trying to
loan,
be
is that
fair.
loan through the state? Is that something we can borrow also?
Tom and I have talked with the village, because what we have considered is that loans only go up to $250,000 at 30% of the costs. As we get the other field done, if we have money left in that grant, the brownfield grant, we may try to work with the village to get some of that needs to be trucked out of here, because that's gonna be an expensive cost to use up the rest of the grant. So then that would be part of our sharing in it. But that grant expires December 31st, and we've talked to them about extending it, see if we can get it extended another 6 months, so that, because I don't anticipate the Kirchmore Field, Clipstein Park area being done by December. I think it's more of a spring project, so we're trying to get that grant extended, but if we don't, we'll work on whatever we can to try and cover costs using that grant to maximize the use of the brownfield grant.
I think what I've heard and read and everything is that the village wants to try to go out by this fall to be one of the first ones out to bid on this projects, so that next spring they're really one of the first ones to get it going. And it coincides with the opening of community center and everything. It's all done at the same time. So, but in general consensus, everybody's okay with it? Formal adoption can come at the next meeting and everybody's not gonna understand what's happening here?
And if you come up with questions tomorrow, next week, give me a call or give Brian a call. And any question's a good question at this, because we're still trying to figure out how this is all gonna work. And if you have the question, somebody else probably will come up with it a day later.
Okay. Thank you. J1, resolution authorizing one-year taxable tax and revenue anticipation revolving line of credit for cash flow purposes and an annual amount not to exceed $6 million. Keith?
Okay, so as our fund balance went down, as our aid went down, the need to cash flow borrows increased. I'm not gonna spend a lot of time on that unless I see questions. So we need to borrow, the most we need to borrow outstanding at any one point in time is $6 million, or actually we're projecting a little less than that, but we wanna have $6 million in case cash flow is a little worse than we anticipate. We switched last year from issuing notes, one-year notes for cash flow borrowing, which is what traditionally school districts have done forever, to doing a revolving line of credit. What this allows us to do is minimize the number of days we have a balance outstanding, minimizes our interest.
The reason in the past you did notes is you could invest the money at a higher rate than what you borrowed it at tax-free, and you made money on the days you didn't need the borrowing. Now, with where rates are, you can't have that arbitrage, it's negative, and you don't want it. So this has allowed us to minimize it. When I look at our costs from the previous year when we issued notes to our costs for this current year that just ended, we saved almost $50,000 by going to a line of credit. So I've worked with, or talked to about 7 banks and financial institutions trying to find who would work with us and give us the best deal. First Merit, who has our banking services, because it all integrates well and they already have us as a customer, gave us the best deal. It is a variable rate loan at LIBOR plus 1%. LIBOR is one of those 30-day LIBORs, something you can find online or Wall Street Journal, anything like that. So we know what it is. We work with Davis and Kielthau as our bond attorney, so they're preparing the documents and verifying that we're legal to borrow this money. There's a cost of $9,250, the commitment letter, and that's the reason why in the past no one did lines of credit, because that commitment fee you're locked into, you pay regardless. We're gonna make it up by not having to pay the interest, so this is a much more cost-effective option. We take advances day before payroll or the day of a payroll, and taxes come in 2 days after payroll, we pay it off, and it's worked really well. And as I said, $6 million is the most that can be outstanding at any one point in time. I think last year we had balances, we took advances probably 5 times during the year.
Is this a rolling line?
It's a revolving line, so we may
When do
borrow
we
it.
have to renew it?
What's that?
Is it a yearly renewal?
It's an annual, has to be an annual renewal, and that's a good question, Jay, because one of the questions that comes up on a different topic that relates to this is, why do we do our annual meeting in July? We can't do this borrowing until after we've had our annual meeting. So if we move our annual meeting back, we have to do the borrowing later. And we can't take an advance on this line after July 1st. That's by state statute, some goofy thing, because now we're in the next budget year, and we can't take an advance on the line until the annual meeting has approved our budget. So what I'm trying to do, our first draw will be in August for about 4 days until we get an August 20th settlement on final taxes, or 21st, but we have a 20th payroll. So we'll take a draw for a couple days. If we didn't renew this line in August, I'd have had to take the draw at the end of June and held that balance out here until August 22nd, and I have collected funds. So that's the whole timing of it and why we do this. So it can't be more than an annual, it has to be an annual renewal or an annual full reissuance.
Commitment fee annual as well?
Yes. Because basically they're committing that capital that at any time I could call them and say, we need $6 million. So that's their compensation for having those funds available for us. And that commitment fee was less than the other institutions I talked to, and the rate was significantly less.
And we did this last year, didn't we?
Yes, we did. It worked well.
I'm going back a little bit now. We try to keep 24 to 28% fund balance, right?
We are not at that level.
What are we at?
We are, I believe, we're gonna be in probably the 22% range once we have final audit numbers, because we had a good year with health insurance, and we put a fair amount in fund balance.
So we got $7 million in fund balance, and that's nowhere near enough that we can.
Correct. That 24 to 28% range was set up back when we were overall 60% aided as a district, and our negative tertiary aid percentage was 20%. And now as we rely more on property taxes, less on aid, we get property taxes much later in the year than we get aid, it increases the amount we need to borrow.
So at any one point in time, we could have up to $13 million of needed in short-term borrowing?
$6 million, we're at 13.
Can't you use your fund balance that we have?
Oh, yeah, we 13 million short in funding at cash at one period of time. But remember, fund balance is not your bank account. If we have 7 million in fund balance, we don't on June 30th, July 1st have $7 million in the bank, because you've always got receivables due, and that's the problem. You've got all these receivables, and we have to start paying people payroll, for example, when they start working. So our 12-month employees start getting it July 1. But we're not getting aid from the state. First payments in September, the majority of it comes November and March. We're not getting any property taxes until January, February, and August. So all our revenues come in second half of the year, and a good portion of our expenditures first half. So we never really have that $7 million balance.
Wait a minute, what did Brian just read to us?
That's what our fund balance is, but
Okay.
that's not a cash balance, that's a fund balance, that's an accounting entry that says your assets are bigger than your liabilities. But your asset could be taxes receivable, which is one of the big assets of it, because we don't
Okay.
get that tax payment in until August 21st, which is the final payment for this past levy that you did over a year ago.
Okay.
All right, I will recommend that we approve the line of credit as presented.
Second.
Got a motion and a second. All those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Thank you. Number 2, resolution authorizing a 10-year state trust fund loan for $1 million. This is related to what we were just talking about as far as our remediation.
Remediation, yes. So the good news is state budget included the ability to do this borrowing outside of the revenue limit, outside of the aid formula. So this will free up $100,000 in the budget that we presented tonight, that I was planning to make this payment, and it's probably a little more than $100,000 a year to get to that $1 million over 10 years because we've got interest. I looked at what our options were, talked to First Merit Bank and several other financial institutions about this one as well. The best option I could find, state trust fund loans, fixed rate 3.25%. We can prepay it at any time if we have any type of payment from anybody who we are able to collect from. The state has not given me rules on how all this works, but I need to get this financing in place so we're going to start construction. We have a bunch of costs that we've already incurred that we're also going to use this to cover, including legal fees, if I can get the state to say that's okay. So I'm still trying to finalize with the state what I can include in this, because when legislators passed the budget, they included the language to allow this. It didn't give the details that Department of Public Instruction is going to have to put together on what we can include and how it all works. But this is the best option, cost effective and legally, and the best way to work it. It gives us the most flexibility and the best rate. Separate levy, so at the annual meeting next year, it'll be a different levy line that you'll be approving.
I'll also make a recommendation to approve this trust fund loan as it was presented.
I'll second it.
It's a much better option for us.
Got a motion and a second. Any other discussion?
Do we have to do something with the resolution that is attached?
You can waive the reading of the resolution, because that is their resolution that they require.
We should have the clerk read that, shall we? See that look I got? Just kidding, Jim.
Will we sign it or not?
Yeah.
We all have to.
We got a motion and a second. All those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Number 3, commemoration of school facilities recommendation for Parkview Fitness Center.
Can I stay seated like Keith does?
Sure.
Is that okay?
Sure.
Thank you.
You don't have a microphone over there.
Oh, Brad.
For a FIAD thing, you'll get 15 steps
You
for
come-
walking over there.
You can come and sit right here.
Oh, man, there's a little light over there. Okay, I'm here tonight following a donation and a family presentation. The FIAD team, consisting of Sherry Craig, Steve Woodcraft, who retired this past year, Jolene Blindauer, Kim Tremmel, Drew Meinel, are requesting to name the Parkview Fitness Room after Dawn Van Hoosen. Sherry, Steve, and Jolene all taught with Dawn. Dawn was a FIAD teacher at Parkview in the Ashwaubenon School District from 1971 to 2003. She passed away from breast cancer. She was an avid golfer, and as a result, our students benefit from a golf unit at Parkview during their 3 years in FIAD. She was also a big promoter of staying active. Dawn's husband, Dan, made a generous donation last spring in memory of Dawn for $10,000 to the FIAD department to use as they wish. The FIAD staff has decided to use it for the fitness center to continue to maintain the equipment that they purchased with the PEP grant money. And then also for the maintenance as well as for purchase of new equipment in the future, possibly adding to their golf unit and golf equipment. We are requesting the approval for the fitness center to be dedicated in her memory and honor, and name the Dawn Van Hoosen Fitness Center.
Okay. I know that you taught there when I was there.
She taught there when I was there also.
Oh, really? And I did not know her, but I felt like I got to know her through this and through talking to Dan, as well as the teachers that worked with her.
Do we have a motion for this?
I'll make a motion. I think it's a great idea.
I'd second it. I just don't have our naming policy in front of us to make sure that it meets the guidelines.
I think there's some
Is that-
precedent.
We
That's
did
fine.
once, we did the choir room, right?
Right, I just,
At the high school.
No, at the middle school.
Middle
Oh,
school.
middle school.
Yeah, I
Did
think
we
it was
do something at the high school with, recently?
middle school's after Mary Eisenreich.
Yep.
okay. So I assume it follows that
Yeah.
policy?
But there was some, so.
Everything follows.
We just need board approval for the naming rights, that's really.
Okay,
what
then
it
I'll,
says.
I'll second it.
Okay, we got a motion and a second. Is there any other discussion? All those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Brad.
Number 4, grievance policy update, second reading. I think we
This
have
is
to-
just a second reading, and remember, what it includes is the autonomy for me to appoint an independent hearing officer in the event it's needed, and we don't have to schedule a special board meeting to do so.
Okay.
So do we need a motion to approve that?
Yes.
I'll make the motion to approve that.
I'll second it.
Got a motion and a second to approve the grievance policies, second reading. Any discussion? All those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes 5-0. Thank you. Number 5, hockey trip. Nick?
I'll get on. Per our WIA membership rules, to play a contest on a Sunday, I need board approval. Our hockey schedule has been challenging. I try to stay ahead of the game by about a year for scheduling. We're only 6 months away, less than that, but the hockey team wants to fill 3 games in Sheboygan, the 27th, 28th, and 29th of November. It's Friday, Saturday, Sunday. And it's not unusual in hockey that they play on Sundays, what I've found out from other tournaments, but this is the first time we would be playing on a Sunday. It does take the place of their trip where they travel to Rochester, Minnesota, so they don't have to spend as much money to go there. We do not finance their busing, or a lot of their cost from the athletic department or activities department. They finance all that on their own. But this is a tournament that in Sheboygan that has a level of competition that is right up their alley for this year. So I'm asking permission that they can play on Sunday, the 29th.
Okay.
I'll make the motion to accept the proposal as presented.
I'll second it.
Got a motion and a second. Any other discussion?
Oddly, I will be in Rochester, Minnesota over holiday break. Instead of the hockey
You
team.
watch hockey then.
All those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Thank you.
Motion passes. Thank you. Okay, Board of Superintendent Communications. I have nothing. Okay, L, future board meeting topics. The board workshop is scheduled for Monday, August 25th at 5:30 right here before our next meeting, which is the same day, not the 24th, at 6:30 following that.
Jennifer.
It says the 24th.
You were testing us.
Yeah. Need a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Nice job.